Headline today comes from Marijuana Moment by Ben Andlin. Let's see. Older patients using medical cannabis experience considerable improvement in health and well-being, study finds. A new study on the impacts of medical cannabis on older adults finds that cannabis-based products may provide multiple therapeutic benefits, including health and well-being, sleep, and mood. The study collected data from T21, a large observational study of patients in the UK seeking treatments with medical cannabis. The authors observed sizable reduction in pain, severity, and pain interference among older patients. The research, published in Drugs and Aging, is meant to address the general paucity of high-quality research around cannabis in older adults. Patients older than 65 are commonly excluded from clinical trials at a time when they are increasingly turning to medical cannabis for relief. There is evidence that older individuals may be the fastest growing in the use of medical cannabis. Coupled with their frequent exclusion from controlled trials, the authors indicate a growing need for real-world evidence to assess the effectiveness and safety of cannabis for older individuals. The prescribing of cannabis-based medical products has been legal in the UK since 2018, although there's been a lack of access from the National Health Service. Also, cannabis-based products are commonly prescribed via the private sector, while national guidelines recommend only 2 natural cannabis products and 1 synthetic cannabinoid. There are currently over 200 unlicensed cannabis products available for prescription in the UK. So it sounds like the trap is alive as well in London as it is in New York. Results of this study showed consistent improvements in 4 well-being measures between entry and 3-month follow-up. There were notable differences between the younger and older groups of patients. For example, a large proportion of the older patients were female, more reported chronic pain as a primary condition, and more were likely to be taking multiple prescribed drugs. They were less likely, however, to have used cannabis before and less likely to have reported using it daily. Patients over 65 were also more likely to receive CBD-dominant oil and less likely to receive THC-dominant flower. While the extent of improvement in quality of life and mood was less for older individuals than for those aged under 65, it was still substantial, and together with improvements in general health and sleep, suggests that older age individuals may derive multiple health benefits from cannabis-based medical products. The article also points to a recent U.S. NIH $8.4 million grant for psychedelic-assisted therapy to treat chronic pain in older adults. The research applicants can include classic psychedelics like psilocybin, DMT, LSD, and MDMA in the study, but cannot include cannabis or ketamine because they are not considered psychedelics. So the UK continues to study cannabis while the US places regulatory hurdles to the study of cannabis. Why do you think that is? Also, the elderly are the fastest growing cannabis using demographic in the US. Are dispensaries catering to the elderly? Will grandma ever be able to shop at a dispensary? This is Dr. Jean Talleyrand with High at 9 News.
This is great news. Dr. T, you keep on bringing us great news each week, man. Shout out to the seniors out there, man. Jesus. For real. This is
once again, the Rostas were right when they said herb is the healing of the nations.
Yeah.
The healing of the nations.
Exactly.
When are we going to start following the data in this country?
Yeah,
we're going to start following the Rastas in this country.
The original data, right?
The original data, yes. I'm not mad at that.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
The elders.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about this, Mathieu St. Germain? I mean, you've been on this earth for a long time.
Like I said, bro, the Rastas were right. Herb is the healing of the nations.
Mm-hmm. So you're
just lines up. We all know this is true. You know, cannabis and the psychedelic plants have been healing the human population for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years.
That part's.
And why do you think the government is considering cannabis and ketamine not psychedelic? That was a strange comment, a strange grant
I mean, doctor, I don't consider
that doesn't make sense to me.
I don't consider cannabis psychedelic personally.
Come over to my house, Jay. I'll make you some hash brownies, bro.
It could be that they're not acting on the 5-HT receptor and
Yeah, but
5-HT.
there's
Right,
debate
go ahead.
as to the psychedelic effect. DMT is I believe the NMDA receptor, right?
Yes.
Well, isn't cannabis technically an entheogen and not a psychedelic?
Cannabis is whatever you want it to be.
I thought-
nothing you don't.
I thought only mushrooms were in.
Or are all entheogens psychedelic, or how does that category
That's the
work?
way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, they're all kind of catch-all terms that have been invented to try to classify substances and experiences that really almost defy classification. You know, each one has been manufactured on 10 or 20-year time periods to kind of try to more properly explain what's. I think probably get to a point where there'll be even some newer terms once we have a little bit more science based on what these substances are really doing.
At the end of the day,
Yeah, and I thought-
you're going to say cannabis is God.
Go ahead, Elise.
I was going to say I thought ketamine was also considered a dissociative, but then, some try to loop it in as a psychedelic. So is psychedelic the parent category or the subcategory?
Ketamine was first a
It's likely that it
dissociative
depends on dose.
anesthetic. The reason, check this out, the reason they came up with ketamine, like when you got ketamine was debuted on humans in the Vietnam War, and the reason was you get your legs blown off by a landmine, and they give you morphine to deal with the pain so they can transport you. Well, the first thing the morphine does is it lowers your blood pressure, it lowers your heartbeat, and actually puts you at risk of dying. So at first for the U.S. Army, ketamine was a boon because you could hit somebody with a syringe full of ketamine, go completely unconscious so they stop screaming and wriggling around, and you can transport them. Nothing happens to their blood pressure or their vitals. The reason the U.S. Army stopped and they made it Schedule 1 and made it only for veterinarians, is because these folks would come to in the hospital and be like, yo, dude, I went to another planet and I saw these aliens and they told us that like war was the dumbest thing ever, or I saw God. And the moment the U.S. Army got wind of all these people having these transcendental experiences with deities and or aliens that were telling them war was no bad, they were like, dude, we got to make this stuff illegal. It really started out as an anesthetic and then moved into a psychedelic space.
Go ahead. Well, what you were going to say, Dr. Mark, please. Dr. Mark, you're on mute.
I was just going to say, it might depend on the dose.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of medicines, could have a certain effect at a lower dose, and then at a higher dose, it could be acting on different receptors, or you're just getting a lot more into the brain, and you're getting incorporation presynaptically, and there could be all different kinds of things that affect the experience that you have. But I would say that in general, a psychedelic experience has to be delivered by something that's hitting the 5-HT receptor, which is the things that psilocybin and LSD and those kinds of compounds, the Shulgin library of phenethylamines and tryptamines. But, can someone have a psychedelic experience on cannabis alone? I think they can. I think it has a lot to do with brain chemistry. And Dr. T and I have talked about this before, the connection between the endocannabinoid system and the dopaminergic system and the 5-HT. I mean, they're all related. They're all in the brain. You can't affect one without affecting the other. Dr. T, is that fair to say? Or
Correct. And there's also been some evidence that there may be dimerization between the 5-HT receptors and the cannabinoid receptors. So that means they're just hanging out together and affecting each other. Is definitely crosstalk.
Interesting.